How y'all doing? It's Jared. It's a CCC balisong I picked up a little while ago. I just got done pressing these tang pins back in there. It's falling out on me. And so now what I'm going to do is Loctite these pivots. And the biggest thing about Loctiting a pivot down is Loctiting anything down in particular is making sure that it's clean, that there's no grease, that there's no grime in there. And so what I've done here, as you can see, I just make a little spear point out of this paper towel and actually thread it into this pivot. I'll stick it in there until it stops, and then keep jamming it in there, right? And actually thread this pivot onto the paper towel. Thread that paper towel into the pivot. And if I do this enough, I can actually feel that paper towel catch and start to be pulled into the pivot, right? It'll actually pull itself down in just through the threads, not very heavily, obviously, you know. And so I can pull it all the way out. You can see how much paper towel actually got sucked down in there. And look at just the amount of grease and, you know, this is all factory grease and grime and everything that was in there. And so you want to get rid of all of that. And what I do is wipe it down one good time with just a clean paper towel. Get myself another little spear point here and get some type of solvent. You can use soapy water, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to be using Benchmade Blue Lube, right? 'Cause it's a dry lubricant, works really well. Just get my paper towel a little bit damp. A little bit on there, make sure it's still pointy. And rethread this back into the pivot. I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times. Make sure this pivot's nice and clean. You can see it actually threading onto that paper towel there. It's got kind of stuck in there too. So when I pull it out, you can see it gets all that nice grease and grime and everything out of there. And now that I've done that with the solvent, I'll make another little spear point. And do it again. Making sure to get rid of all that blue lube, get rid of all that grease, possibly water, whatever's in there. If you do use soapy water, give a little bit of time for it to dry. Set it out in the sunlight. Let it sit there for an hour or two. Actually give time to dry, okay? So you make sure that nothing's inside that pivot. You want those threads to be clean. It's the same process with these screws here. You want to make sure there's nothing on the screw. It's nice and clean. You can see that it's shiny. You can see how much oil and just everything that's inside those threads. It's not going to work very well. And my method for cleaning these, right, is get a little bit of wet spot on the paper towel, and I like to use my fingernail. I use my fingernail and actually stick it in the threads of the screw itself, right? Do both of them. See, I'm pinching that screw actually in my fingernails. And then I can take my little screwdriver here, make this easier because the screw's tiny, and actually, thread this screw in and out of my fingernails. Using my fingernails like the female section for this screw. And that way, you can see the thread pattern on there. You can get deep inside all those little threads in this screw here. Make sure there's nothing on it, no grease, no grit, no grime, anything like that. Clean it up. You can see that there. I'm going to do this one more time. Use that same little wet spot. Nice and clean. Take another look. See that? Better, still not great. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to hit up this other pivot. Come back to you. Got my screws clean. Everything looks nice. And so now, it's just a matter of reassembly. Pop both my pivots in. This cheap balisong here, the way this thing is constructed makes it really easy to put it together because it's on just 2 pivots, right? And so I just pivot them apart, stick my washers on. I'm actually going to go 2 on this back side. And just do 1 on top. And my latch actually fell out, and I'm tired of that thing, so I'm going to leave it out. Blade back on there. Stick my washers on. I'm going to do this one at a time. Make it less complicated. Alright. what you got to make sure that you're assembling this thing correctly. You want to make sure that the bite handle is in line with the blade, that the blade is actually collapsing towards the bite handle, and that it's in the correct orientation that you can actually put the other handle on. And so now that I've got this set up, right, I just need to get a little bit of Loctite on my screw. I'm going to shake this up. It's important that you shake Loctite, right? So I'll actually demonstrate this one here. Because there's going to be a little bit of less thickness up in this tube, right? I don't know if it's going to come across, but this first section, see how thin that is? Well, it's actually staying relatively thick. But once I actually get down into what I just shook up, you see how much thicker that is than what came out at first? The Loctite will separate over time, right? And so you want to give it a really good shake, and then I always dispose of just the little bit that's left in the actual tube. This is all absolute proper weight of Loctite. You don't have to really do it this neat. It's just a matter of getting the proper amount on the screw, honestly, is the biggest key. Because if you use too little, there's not going to be enough. It's not going to grab the actual threads. It's not going to work. If you use too much, it's going to flow off of the actual screw itself, get into your pivot and jam up your mechanism. So it's really just in getting the proper amount on the screw itself, right? And you can see that there, it's bubbling up. That's a bit too much. So what I'm gonna do is take my little paper towel and just take off just a little bit of that Loctite. And you can see that there. That's just the right amount. And it's only on one side. This whole screw isn't covered. You can see that there, the back side's not covered. It's only on one side, but it's a decent amount. It's not thin, but there's enough on there. And then what I like to do here is actually use my screwdriver as like a guide. I'll stick the screw on the actual driver itself, and then you can see the way I'm holding it on there. And then I'll use this as a guide to actually guide it into that screw hole. And that just minimizes the chances of me actually spreading it around in the pivot mechanism itself, getting it where it shouldn't be. So I'm just going to repeat that process. Well, set up my actual knife first. It's a good idea to hold the back of your pivot, because if it's a non-captured pivot, it will fall out. Set my little washer up. So I'm going to set this back down so that my pivot doesn't fall out. Little dab of Loctite. Right there. Take it, put it on my screw, hold it down. No. Get it in the pivot. See, now what I'm going to do, since they're in there, tighten them all the way down, make sure everything's set, give it about half a turn back out. I would normally do about a quarter turn if this was a 51, but it needs a little bit more play. Still slow. Back out. Give it about 3/4 of a turn back out. And it's running dry currently. There's no lube in it, so flowing good. Yep. Now, it's out of commission for 24 hours. Loctite is a glue. It takes about 24 hours to set. So I can keep playing with this thing, but those screws are just going to move. If they had a problem with backing out before, they're going to continue to back out until that Loctite's hardened. So give it 24 hours, let it stay out of commission, give it enough time for that Loctite to actually properly cure and harden. And yeah, that's it. Y'all have a good one.